Welcome everyone to Single Malt Strategy. This is podcast episode number... Is there a number here?
We're off to a real good start.
And we are off to a real good start.
Sounds like someone who's done this before. Episode 82?
I'd like to welcome my co-host, Finnish Jager. Finnish Jager, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me on him one more time.
We were really looking forward to having you back. Unfortunately, we also have Wolfpack345 with us. Welcome, Wolf.
Hello.
And the historical gamer, Matt.
Howdy.
Since this is obviously going to be released before the end of 2023, people are really interested in hearing our take on the 2023 games.
Yeah, they're on their edge of their seat.
Yeah, and they certainly haven't heard anybody do a review of the 2023 games yet. I'm sure none of those have gone out. So
not on any of our channels, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
No, yeah, that's right. Honor bound.
If someone posts a video...
I might have done a list or two, but let me point out that I recorded that all the way back in 2023. So I've given it a whole year. It's 2024 now.
It's still 2023.
Oh, what are you talking about, Finn? It was 2024.
Tortuga said it was 2023.
He was making it sound like we were talking before the year was up. Yeah, like just
I
to be
know.
clear.
Yeah, I'm playing along. You know, I
don't want. No, you're just trying to set me up for failure. Be like, oh, it took you for so long.
No,
to
you two
edit.
are just lagging behind. He's like a comedic genius.
What a true co-host.
You shut the fuck up!
Oh my god.
What is that bit from? That's really funny.
I don't even remember.
That's good. I like
All right,
that. Oh boy.
We're going to
Off the rails immediately. Oh my gosh, this is like a train derailment.
We're going to do our top 3 games. Let's start with Wolf. Why don't you go first? What was your number 3 game in 2023?
My number 3 game. Number 3 is a tricky one. I mean, I got number 2 and number 1. You know what? I'm just gonna throw a game out there. Baldur's Gate 3, in no particular order. I know it's not really this, podcast, single malt strategy. I guess Baldur's Gate kind of be considered a strategy game
For sure.
It's such a great game, by the way, which I still haven't played, but I mean, I've probably watched about 3 hours or more on the... Anyway, it's a great game, so I think it fits. There's one of those things every now and then, those great games come along and it transcends genres.
Sure, like once in a decade, yeah, type of deal. I think Baldur's Gate 3 definitely fits in that.
Yeah, but it's turn-based, right? I mean, it does definitely have strategy elements to it. Like, I would say that's a legitimate game for this list, even without the, fact of how big it was.
We have a historical bias, I suppose, with our gaming. But yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, love it. It's great. Been playing the heck out of it, looking to play some more.
Wolf search history is...
Whatever. Cut that.
So, Wolf, you'll have the liberty of choosing who you want to pick on next for their number 3.
I'd like to hear the Historical Gamers number 3.
So number 3 on my list, I'll say something that may be controversial. I don't know. Tortuga, it's a favorite of Tortuga's, I know. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, because it officially came out this year.
You're number 3.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
When he said that, I was like, you're not serious, but he is.
I am 100% serious. And let me I won't belabor the point.
Ugh.
Defend yourself.
Defend yourself.
No, don't even defend yourself. This is just walk the plank.
So here's the thing about Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought that I think makes it at least worthwhile taking a look at, and I think is more notable in terms of the games that officially came out this year on Steam. Obviously Ultimate Admiral, we've talked about it on this podcast a ton, so I won't talk a bunch about it, but right, it's one of those games like Rule the Waves where you're a secretary of a navy, you run a navy, you design ships, and you buy them and then fight them in fictional wars that generate way too frequently to be real, thank God. And it definitely has problems. It has a very bad UI. It has a clunky and kind of bloated feeling campaign, which, by the way, Rule the Waves kind of does now too. And it has not great battle generation or sort of strategic map management of fleets. But the reason it is on this list is a game like Rule the Waves is that's a tough sell to anybody who doesn't already know what it is or who isn't really like Wargamer or Wargamer adjacent, right? Like you're trying to sell someone on a game that effectively is a glorified spreadsheet looking game, right? Like most of that game looks like you could make it in a complex Excel spreadsheet. And the battles are not much better. Ultimate Admiral has Kerbal Space Program management elements to its shipbuilding, which is pretty easy to pick up and kind of fiddle around with. It's not, I think the holes are not perfect, and sometimes it feels like you're fighting the system, but overall, like, it looks good when you're building ships, and it is pretty easy to build a ship.
Matt, can I jump in and just ask you a question, though? What is it about the game that you gives it number 3 for you this year?
The reason it's on the list is because it came out this year, and I've never put it on a list before.
It's like a good game, but a number 3? I mean,
I don't think there were a ton of war games, and that's kind of the direction I built my list on, was largely war games. I don't think there were a ton of war games that actually came out this year. There were a lot of strategy games, but there weren't a ton of war games that came out this year, and that's kind of how I built my list. Everybody builds their list differently.
Okay.
And I felt like if I was trying to talk about games that are war games that came out this year, I don't think you could not talk about this game, because I think I think this is a game that appeals to people that traditional war games do not. You look at it for a war game, looks pretty. Mechanics, not too complicated to figure out. Battles look pretty nice. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of what hurts Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts when it comes to people's perception of where it should fall on the rankings, I'm not going to say they're not valid criticisms, but I think a lot of them are born from disappointed expectations rather than the game actually being bad. Even though I just said a bunch of stuff about it that's not great. Like, I think Ultimate Admiral gets penalized because there were a lot of high expectations by folks in the wargaming community that it did not live up to. But if it was released by literally anybody else and it came out of left field and people didn't have expectations about it and it was just released, I think this would have a completely different reception of a game. That's not to say it's flawless, but Rule the Waves isn't flawless either. Rule the Waves has a lot of problems, and people adore that game.
So Rule the Waves 3 also came out this year. And you're saying, I'm guessing that Rule the Waves 3 was not on your top 3.
It was not.
So you think that Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought is a better game than Rule the Waves 3?
I think Rule the Waves 3 is not a meaningful enough improvement over Rule the Waves 2 to like stand on its own as this is a great game that came out this year. Like I play Rule the Waves 3 and I'm just like, okay, they added a bunch of bloat to Rule the Waves 2, which was largely they added bloat to Rule the Waves 1. And so I don't think Rule the Waves 3 stands alone, whereas Ultimate Admiral...
No, I mean, I kind of disagree. I mean, Rule the Waves 3 I agree with. Rule the Waves 3 I would not say... It didn't make my top 3. It's like kind of an honorable mention only just because I think it's significant that it was released, and it's not on my top 3. And it's obviously just a dominant force on my YouTube channel. And it's an iconic game in the like grognardy wargame community. But yeah, I don't think Rule the Waves 3 made it. Rule the Waves 2 was good though. It was good-ish because it added carriers, and carriers are interesting.
They're interesting. I will give you that. I don't necessarily think carriers are very well done in Rule the Waves 2, but I will give you that. I mean, they added a considerably new mechanic to the game, and they are interesting to fiddle around with. But I guess what I'm trying to say is if Rule the Waves 3 came out today as the first game in the Rule the Waves series, it would absolutely be above Ultimate Admiral. But I don't think Rule the Waves 3 did enough for me, just, when compared to Rule the Waves 2, to be like, okay, yes, I'm really excited to play Rule the Waves 3. It does so much new stuff. I think Ultimate Admiral does some stuff that Rule the Waves doesn't do that I find interesting and enjoyable, and that I will come back to from time to time to play with. And honestly, like if Rule the Waves 3 didn't exist, there wouldn't be, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal to me. I could just go play Rule the Waves 2 and get 99% of what Rule the Waves 3 would give me.
Well, I do feel like the most exciting feature of Rule the Waves 3 is the fact that it's on Steam.
Okay, fair.
And not through, that's what I see the improvement of Rule the Waves from 2 to 3, and not the anti-piracy situation they utilized before.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But if that does not justify buying a $40 game over again, essentially.
No, but it's reminds me of like sports, right? Where like you got a lot of players who are injured all the time, and there's a saying that goes around where it's like availability is part of what you have to be a great player, right? You can be the best player in the league when you're healthy, but if you're never healthy, that doesn't do your team any good. That's kind of true about games too, right? Like if you're the best game that's anyone's ever made about this topic, but you're hidden away in this tiny little niche, frankly, as far as most players are concerned, that doesn't matter because they're never going to find you. The fact that they do get on Steam, that is definitely something that is worth talking about because they are now exposed to a far wider potential customer base than they ever have been before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just looking at their Steam page now, they have like 500-ish reviews. I don't know, that seems like a lot to me for a game like this.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably only sold a couple thousand when they were on, like maybe 5,000-6,000. Maybe I don't know. I'm making numbers up. I shouldn't. But certainly, what's the percentage of folks that leave a review too, right? So
minuscule.
So I'm sure they sold a lot better on Steam, you would think, than they sold on naval warfare simulations. Anyway, I think that's enough about Ultimate Admiral. That's kind of my logic for putting it on the list.
Well, Finnish Jaguar.
All right, yeah, I'll go next. My list is really just 3 games I like playing the most. It wasn't games that were released in 2023. But my number 3 game is actually going to be Plate Up.
Oh!
I don't know if this will make Tortuga's list or not. Probably, I guess maybe not. But I think mainly because I just had so much fun playing multiplayer with Tortuga. Just every night that we played, I had so much fun. The game is kind of unique in that, like, when we were losing and when things were difficult, it was almost like even more fun. It's like the things were stressful, but we were always laughing about, funny situations. So I was just going to say, I never played the single player. I only played multiplayer with you, Tortuga. And I feel like I'd only play multiplayer with other people. And I think that's perfectly fine with that game. I had so much fun. So that's why it's on my list.
It didn't make mine, but that's mostly because I didn't really consider that for the genre. I was really only considering war games, strategy games, stuff like that. But it's an easy recommend. I highly recommend it. It does kind of epitomize that whole losing is fun mentality. It is pretty fun to lose. I mean, you don't feel it in the moment, but then afterwards you're like rolling, laughing about it.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, the replayability of that game was extremely high. I was impressed.
Yeah, I actually played that one too, and it was fun for what it is. It's not a game I could sink like hundreds of hours into or anything, but what little I played of it, I enjoyed it.
I have not played it, but I watched you guys playing it and it looked fun.
Did they not invite you?
No one ever invites me to play these things. It makes me wonder why I'm,
Speaking of ICBM 2, baby, we got to do it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Get backstabbed again. Get my destroyer sunk off the coast of Kamchatka or whatever, Sakhalin or whatever it was.
One of my favorite gaming memories. Anyway, off topic again, sorry.
Well, that's all I have to say about Plate Up. So Tortuga, did you talk about your third?
No, not yet. I have some wild picks for this last year. So I don't know how I even ended up deciding on this. I was probably just having a weird night. But number 3 for me is a game called Pegasus Expedition. And I really don't know if it's a great game. I could only half-heartedly recommend it, and only for people. So first of all, it's a 4X game that has an interesting take that it's very narrative driven. It's practically like playing a story, but also a 4X game. So it tries to merge these. Generally, I would say 4X is the most sandbox, the least narrative driven as a genre. So it's pretty interesting to see somebody try to do it. And I basically am just applauding the innovation of that game. Steam ended up picking Starfield as the most innovative game, which is like the biggest joke I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's kind of
just hilarious. Pegasus Expedition has a legitimate claim to maybe being innovative. I really don't think that I've seen a story-based 4X game. And, it's like the 4X elements of it are like okay. So that's why I can't recommend it, because just the gameplay itself is not like hugely compelling. I feel like it's a lot of things that we've all seen before in 4X, and probably a lot of things that different mechanics have been done better by different 4X games. But the fact that they have this emphasis on the story was pretty cool. And I feel like if you enjoyed the story, you would get a lot out of the game. So that's my my number 3 is a space 4X game.
Did you say that you wouldn't really recommend it?
Like half-heartedly. I guess it would only appeal. So for people who are interested in 4X games and who wanted to take a chance on a story-based 4X game, I would recommend it. For people who aren't interested in 4X games, I probably would not, because I don't think it does. It's not going to be a great a representative 4X game for them anyway. I would probably recommend people start with like Civ or something first.
Our top 3s, by the way: a game Tortuga won't recommend, and a game everybody was yelling at me for including, Ultimate Admiral.
Everyone should play Baldur's Gate 3, baby.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty solid number. If that's your number 3?
Yeah.
Well, what about number 2? What's your number 2?
My number 2 is, this game did not come out last year. It has had a large DLC come out, so I'm pretty much including that as it. But my number 2, Call to Arms, Gates of Hell, Ostfront. and then the expansion is Liberation. I've been really liking Call to Arms. It's been honestly probably one of my most played games of the year, so that's why it's in the number 2 slot. World War II RTS game, kind of a spiritual successor, I guess, to Men of War, which I never even played, so there is that too. But
You just like calling Artie down onto churches.
Artillery is a lot of fun. I force Finnish here to play it, and it's like it's good stuff. I enjoy it.
He's got a gun to my head like some Soviet commissar.
Yeah, it's like one of those games.
Please do not send me over the top, comrade.
It's one of those games that's pretty stressful, but in a good way.
Yeah, when you were saying you force Finnish to play it, I thought you were going to say you force his troops into the church and then you call artillery down on them. But
no, that's.
I did see you called Artie in, and you were like, one of you was walking through your own artillery fire.
That was all Finish's fault, though.
I thought the artillery was going to stop, and my guys just, they ran right into it.
And like the multiplayer's fun in that game and relatively stable. And the single player experience is great with their dynamic campaign. So.
Can you not do the campaign with co-op?
No, you can do that in co-op too.
Okay. Like whenever I see people playing it, it seems like it is a great co-op game. Like one of those games, like you want to play with friends and you want to do something like this. This is a game to jump in. I've played it a little bit single player. It's fine. I like it.
We should do some multiplayer. Let's do that.
Invite me sometime. Okay.
Okay, I will. Next time, Big.
Wolf and I are doing co-op campaign, right?
Yeah, we're doing the co-op campaign. Like they have scripted missions that go over like historical operations. And then you have the dynamic stuff where you kind of pick and choose your forces. Admittedly, I kind of like the dynamic stuff a little more, but the set pieces in the actual like handcrafted missions are pretty cool. Anyway, that's my number 2. THG. What is your number 2, sir?
And my number 2 is a game I included because I just wanted to say I told you so to Tortuga. So at number 2, I've got Ultimate General American Revolution, which is not a completed game by any means yet, but effectively it's the newest Ultimate General game in that series. It's made by Game Labs. It is a game that takes place in the American Revolution, where you, right now anyway, you can only play as the Americans. It starts in 1775. You build your armies, you manage them on a strategic map of like Massachusetts, New York, sort of the northern section of the American Revolution, like into Canada too. And then you move your armies around, you try and take key objectives like Boston or Montreal or Quebec, the main objectives of the war in 1775 and early 76. And then when armies collide, you fight a tactical battle on the tactical map. And this is on the list less because of where it is right now, but more because of what
I don't understand. Like I tried to bite my tongue and let you talk, but how is this on your list? How is this on?
It's in early access, and I said it was going to come out this year, and last year you were like, there's no way it's coming out this year. So you know what?
Well, it shouldn't have come out this year.
It's not bad.
It's not great.
It's not bad, and it's a number 2 game of the year.
I know, right? Like, what did... Okay, anyway.
Yeah, it's whatever. Mr. Tortuga, I wouldn't even recommend my number 3 game on my list.
I'm wondering, like, can we check his mail? Is this guy on Game Lab's payroll?
I can't remember if it was my most anticipated list or my top 5 list, but someone said the same thing to me about my other list I made, because like 3 of the 5 games were Slytherin games. And they're like, oh, this dude's on the Slytherin payroll.
Slytherin chill! Yeah. I will say, I love the idea of the Ultimate General American Revolution. That being said, I have not played much of Age of Sail. I played Civil War a lot and really liked it.
Civil War's great.
So the reason it's on them, just to be frank, the reason it's on my list is I think they nailed the strategic layer where you have to manage stuff on the strategic map and then armies move around and collide and fight. I think that is pretty well done. I have some criticisms that I feel, and this is kind of true for all the Ultimate General games, except maybe Gettysburg. So I guess the only other Ultimate General, but it's true of Age of Sail too. It's like, I don't think they get elevation great on their tactical battles in any of their games. Like maps feel kind of flat, kind of in the same way that like, I think Eugen Systems games, elevation never really feels like it matters. So I think that's a little bit of a problem. And battles are a little repetitive at this point, so I think they need to add maybe a bigger battlefield map or not have units spawn so close to each other, because there's not a great opportunity to maneuver. But I really think the strategic map is like the way that implementation is handled, I think to me is very well done. I think it could use some fine tuning, but I really do think like I'm excited to see the way that's all going to be put together when it gets further along in early access, because I was very nervous about how they were going to handle going from purely scripted strategic, manage your army, but like every battle is on a list of battles and you just go down the list and fight the next battle, which is how their previous games all work, to an actual sort of dynamic campaign on a strategic map that's in pausable real time. And I think they did a very good job of that so far. So yes, it is very early, but the reason it's on this list is I think the building blocks are there and there's fine tuning that needs to occur, but the building blocks are there and are pretty solid. And I think it shows me that there's going to be a very good game when this is done, I think.
One quick question that throws me off with all games, labs games. Do you get copy strikes if you don't disable the music when you upload to YouTube with this particular video game? Because every other game, like, you have to turn off the music or you get copyright strikes because they don't license their... I don't know what the situation with that is, but it is...
Yeah, the license they're purchasing isn't like...
Which is fine. I do all my music and post-editing anyway, so whatever. But I was just curious if that was still a thing.
I don't know. I'll have to go back and double check. I think I always have the music turned off now because that's what I'm used to with Game Lab games. But I don't remember there being a pop-up like with their other games where it's like, hey, content creators, make sure you disable the music or you'll get copyright strikes. So I'm not sure. There isn't a ton of music in the game right now. Like, they've got some folks playing some wind instruments, but it's not like... It's like built into the sound effects of kind of the menu, as opposed to this is a score of a soundtrack type deal.
I see. Cool beans.
So, I mean, you may disagree with me here, Tortuga, but I do think there's valid reasons to put it on this list at number 2.
No, I agree with you. I think I'm not sure if it would make my top 3. I didn't play it yet, so it's hard to say with early access games, when do you put them out? Because basically the whole release cycle is totally effed nowadays. Like, what does it mean for a game to be released versus released to early access? It means so wildly different things for different games. Yeah,
and I don't want to. We can move on, but I do want to say I will add one caveat or one piece to what you just said, is that I feel like with Game Lab games, a lot of times you can tell if it's going to be a problematic early access game. Naval Action, you could tell, like, this thing is, what is going on here? Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, even though it's on my list, but like when it first came to early access, it was like, what the heck is this, right? Like, it was all just like scenarios, and the campaign, like when it came out, it was like, this doesn't even, like, it's not even reflective of what the final campaign is going to be. To me, this is reflective of what the final campaign is going to be, along with polishing. More needs to be added to it. The core of the system is here, and it seems to work well. That's my opinion. So that's why I'm optimistic about this one in a way that I haven't been on the last couple of games. But anyway, moving on. Finish. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Suzerain. So I really like this game. I think I really like the story and the different paths you could take if you play the game multiple times. I really enjoyed kind of the world building and the in-game lore and how that was presented and how it was important to the story. The game had like that in-game fact book, and it was interesting just to read. You learn more about your nation and the other nations. So it felt like a realistic world.
They added so much that they didn't need to add, I think, to the lore of that.
So I would agree. I would agree because I think the game was lacking on like decisions for your national policies or like the foreign policy. Like, because there was information about cities and other nations that you never really had any impact with. The game would have been better if you had more decisions to make as president.
Well, what I was trying to say is, and that's not, I'm not saying that as a dig. I'm saying I think you're right. There's a really strong sense of lore to this game, and I think it's because they added so much that was like not always directly relevant to what you were doing, right? Like it felt like a real world because there was so much outside of just your narrow window, which I think a lot of strategy games sometimes struggle with. And the fact that they added all this, it feels like a bigger world than just your little kingdom that you're directly interacting with. And this is a great game. I love that it's on this list. The writing and the storytelling of this game is just so brilliant, and it is far more immersive, I think, than you would get just watching a stream. I think it's one of those games like when you play it, you're like, whoa. Watching a stream, I could see you being like, and I think you said that. I don't know, like, I don't know if these kind of games are for you, or maybe they just don't show great on stream, but it kind of feels like, all right, I'm watching someone read and click buttons. And, when you play it, I think the storytelling and the writing is so well done that it really draws you in.
Yeah, I'll agree. Yeah, when I watched you play, I wasn't really hooked. But playing the game myself, I have the ability to make my own decisions, right? So I can drive the story, and my decisions is the way I want to. So yeah, I think that really hooked me into that game. Other things I liked about the game, visually, I really liked how the map looked. It was kind of like that Atlas kind of look. I liked the color palette and just the way that the map was presented. And then, just like mentioned before, I like the replayability. I've only played 2 playthroughs, but they've been different both times, and you can tell where there's some similarities with the path. Like, there's only a certain number of outcomes that will happen, so that's slightly disappointing. But overall, you do have a lot of different outcomes in the game.
I don't know if it's changed with some of the updates, but when we did an interview with the developer, I think it was for Single Malt Strategy years ago when it first, because it came out in 2020. And I remember him saying initially anyway, like the way they designed the game was like, you should play this twice. Like they knew it wasn't the kind of game that you're going to play like 30 times, right? It's going to get repetitive eventually, but they felt like there was enough in there that you could really experience the game the way they were hoping you would experience it 2 or 3 times based on the content. So I think you're right. I've only played it a full playthrough 2 times, but it is, I could talk about this for an hour, so I don't mean to sabotage your section. This is just a game I'm glad it was on your list because I love this game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think, like I also mentioned, I wish that there was more decisions that you could make as president to make it seem like you were having an impact on the country. And I know that wasn't really the outcome of the story, because it's a story-driven, country management game. I know they're coming out with, I guess, another DLC, and it's probably going to be the same, but it would be nice if you had more impact on your country's day-to-day, like, policy and foreign policy decisions.
Yeah, it's basically a visual novel, right? Like, despite all the graphs and things they show you, like, it's a choose your own adventure visual novel, as opposed to like, I'm not going to have free reign to do these sliders here to see how I could optimize the economy, right? But I think in that sense, it's probably more realistic. How many decisions, the president isn't in there like, we're going to tweak this way and tweak it this way, right? Like, most presidents in a modern world, things come up and they've got a couple of choices that they're sort of presented as options with, and they have to choose between that. They're, outside of maybe 2 or 3 really key pieces to their agenda, they're not crafting super unique responses to everything that comes out. So I do think there's a level of authenticity to that. That's just the way that, like, leadership works, right? A lot of times leaders are presented with options and you choose between them. You don't invent all the options.
Yeah, going through the game, I was like, I wanted to make more budget decisions. I wanted to make more infrastructure building decisions. I wanted to, call up a neighbor or whatever of a neighboring country and have like a diplomatic dialogue. And I know that's not what the game is really focused on, but I think you could probably combine that with the story to improve the game. But it's definitely a very strong number 2.
It did feel like the foreign policy stuff, there's more of it at the end, but it did feel like, hey, this felt almost more like I'm a governor than I am like a president, right? Like, there weren't a lot of options to call up your neighbor and be like, hey, I need your help on whatever. Mm-hmm. Apparently Rizio, which is the DLC, is going to lean much more into foreign policy than domestic, which should be interesting. In Rizio, you're basically going to be like, I don't know if you're really Saudi Arabia, but you're a monarchy in an oil-rich state. So, take that for what it is, which I think is a very different type of story, and I'm really excited to see what they do with that.
Yeah, well, that's all I got. Who's next? Tortuga, you're number 2. What's up?
All right, my number 2 is, I'm doing a little curveball here. I mixed mine up. I just listening to you guys talk, I decided to switch my order.
Oh boy.
Number 2 is going to be Great War Western Front. Honestly, it was probably my number 1 standalone game, but I'll explain why it's not my number 1 when we get to number 1 stuff. But it's a great game. I think everybody's... I want to speak for everyone here. I want to say that probably everyone thought it was a good game.
Everyone in the world or everyone on the podcast?
I enjoyed it, what I played.
This podcast member did not play the game, but enjoyed watching people stream it.
It wasn't as I guess realistic as I kind of hoped it would be, but it was still fun.
See, I always thought that the grind, the way that every battle was like the same, and that how that was really tedious, very well encapsulated what World War One was.
Sure.
That's kind of a backhanded.
Maybe I should play compliment. It more. Yeah, I guess the AI was kind of silly too.
Yeah. No, it.
From when I played, but I don't know if that's been changed or what.
I need to get back to it because they have released a series of patches that are based on when I read the patch notes. I'm like, wow, that feels like that would change a lot, but I haven't played it in a while, so I don't know how real that is. This was, you just wanted to preempt me because this was my number one, but I think this is a really good game. I will say, I think it fits better in the 1915 to 1916 sort of technology period. I think, and maybe a little bit late war. I don't think it does a very good job of modeling like 1918, the way that the war unfolded. It's certainly, and the biggest criticism I would have is that it feels a little too modern. Like some things are a little too easy from an artillery point of view. It'd be interesting if you could only do pre-planned bombardments and you had to pick where to bombard at that point. It's a little too easy to just be like, use modern tactics where like, I'm going to send a small group forward. They're going to look and find where the machine gun nest is. Now, when I see the machine gun nest, I'm going to pinpoint artillery right on top of that machine gun nest and suppress it or destroy it, depending on the type of barrage I call in for, to pin him down for my next attack. That feels Vietnam-esque more than it does World War One.
And not only that, but like the AI, I felt like we already talked about it. Its failing was, I feel like you could learn how to play the game right, and then you knew the best way to play, and then it kind of, like exactly what you're describing, the gameplay kind of was mired in like this repetitive loop because you figured out how to beat the AI and then you just did the same thing over and over again. Okay, move my troops off to the side, go up and flank, use artillery, attack.
Things I really, really liked about it, though, one thing I don't think I hear a lot of people talking about, it's a game with a strategic map, right? Like you've got a strategic map of the Western Front and then you go and you fight battles on the tactical map. I love the way that the resources are limited there. In order to commit to an offensive, you need to have supplies available to commit to that offensive. Supplies are generated on the global map and then distributed out to the tactical battlefields. Every unit sort of carries a little bit of their own, but then like if you really want to commit an offensive in a region, you need to have global supplies coming in to support that. And this is a game that I think does a better job than any other game I've ever seen where, hey, you don't have infinite resources and you have to spend time building up supplies so that you can support an offensive, and you can only support that offensive for so many turns before you kind of got to take a step back and wait for a while before you can actually do that again. Now that kind of gets a little bit nerfed later in the game as you unlock technology that gives you more stuff. At least initially, it really did feel authentic where it's like, I've got to plan out where I want to attack ahead of when I want to attack there. I've got to spend time to do that. While the war's still going on, the AI could launch spoiling attacks that consume some of my supplies in other regions.
I mean, don't you find that's also one of its failings, though, is that, it becomes very grindy because of exactly this. You can't really push in the same area multiple times, and it takes multiple attacks on a different territory in order for it to swap hands. Now, during the one turn that you can't do the offensive, perhaps if you didn't plan well enough, that resets the timer on your... Yeah, I mean, it just takes the game grinds on even longer.
My complaints are more that, one, I wish the map was more dynamic in terms of when you fight a battle multiple times in a region. It would be really cool if you saw the scars of the battle. You don't. They kind of disappear, and then it's just a generic, like, hey, this battlefield is destroyed, right? Like, trenches remain, but other stuff doesn't. I understand from a game design perspective why that would probably be very hard, but it is a little disappointing. But then on the strategic map, what you're talking about, I like the concept behind, like, each unit has a certain number of stars, and you've got to reduce it all the way before you can take a region. Like, I think that is, in theory, probably not a bad way to handle World War I not being a blitzkrieg, where you can't just hit one hex and then hit the hex behind it and then hit the hex behind it, because that's not how the war was fought. I do think it does get a little repetitive. I think maybe they could solve that by nerfing the regions a bit. Instead of making regions 4 stars, you could make a region with 4 stars, 2 stars, and probably have the same vibe to how quickly the front line moves. Like, I think there's ways to solve that. But yeah, I do think that's a little bit of a limitation. I still really love the way that the supplies are allocated, but I do think the strategic layer does have some flaws.
So this was Tortuga's second game of the year or game of 2023? What are your positives? I feel like we are only hearing negatives.
So I think that it actually encapsulated World War One pretty well. We don't have a lot of World War One games, especially. This is like kind of like Company of Heroes. It's like Company of Heroes for World War One. I kind of enjoy even just taking your super tank, get your tank early on, and then just drive it over trenches. And the gameplay is really fun. I think it's fun.
It is a game. It's a game like War in the Pacific, and what I mean by that is it is a game that if you really look at the systems, you can exploit it and you can break it, and you can play the game in a way that I don't think it's intended to be played. I think it's a really good game if you don't do that. If you understand like what the experience that's being driven at, and you just embrace the suck of World War One and try to experience it in that way. And I think that, like I said previously, right, the strategic element of building up supplies, like I've never seen anyone do that in a way that I think works, and I think this game does that. I think the ability to, the slog of trench warfare and how those battles can unfold is really well done. The AI needs some work. Like, this is not a flawless game. I don't think any game is flawless finish, but I do think this is a really good game. It is visually satisfying. It has limitations, but it is a game that is definitely worth playing, and I think it is a standout game of 2023. Whether you want to quibble about it, should it be 1, should it be 2, I think it is a great game that I had a lot of fun with, warts and all.
You caught me flat-footed, Finish, but I think I remembered one thing that I found really compelling about the game. I really like the way they do tech progression. So you have very few points, and you kind of have to choose which way you want to go. Do you want to push towards tanks or push towards artillery? And I found that this worked really well. I was excited to try to get to the next thing. I think it was a meaningful choice between, probably there's an optimal. This game is one of those that I think you can min-max pretty well. But, moving, do I want to get aircraft to have bombers drop bombs on the enemy lines? Do I want to have better artillery? Do I want to push towards tanks? And all those things, as you get higher up the tech tree, they are very powerful. So I found that was really cool. And it was exciting to push towards the different techs just to be able to play with them. And none of them were super disappointing, where it wasn't like I unlocked tanks and I was like, oh, these suck. That was terrible. I wasted my time. Each one of them was pretty rewarding. So that was fun.
I mean, we were going to try and do an episode on this multiple times, and it just kept getting rescheduled. But like, I think tech's a great example of, I also feel like it captured the elements of World War One, right? Like, it starts off, there's barely any trenches. The trenches suck. You don't have good lines of visibility onto the other side, like in 1914. You don't have great observation balloons. You don't have all these other things. And then as the tech evolves, it's like, oh, well, now I can assault better because I can advance behind a rolling barrage, which is something that effectively was developed during the war as like a tactic to getting through trenches. But now the trenches, as tech gets up, your trenches become much more robust and much more indicative of what you think of when you think of World War One. And those trenches stay on the map, so those carry over battle to battle. And so tech is a great place where I think it stands out as being a very well done game. We could spend a 2-hour episode on this game just by itself, I think. Does that bring us back around to Wolf for your number one?
I guess, yeah, my number one, it officially released a little while ago. It's kind of rough around the edges as a small game, but my number one is Destroyer the U-Boat Hunter, which is a game that lets you command a destroyer hunting U-boats in the Atlantic. And that's pretty much all you do, and it does it rather well, in my opinion. I don't know if any of y'all have played it.
Yeah, they sponsored me to do some videos, so I'm obligated to say it is a good game.
Okay, well, you don't have to say that, but
Thank you for money brand.
Yeah, okay. And that's not the reason I'm saying I actually do like it. I'm glad we're getting this perspective of the Battle of the Atlantic, even though it is a Fletcher class destroyer, but that allows them to maybe expand into the Pacific and flesh it out a bit more. So
I enjoyed it too. I'm just giving you shit. It was fun.
It's a fun tactical exercise. I like it.
It can be a little challenging, like to try and do the math of like,
yeah,
because I think it does a good job of simulating all right, you got a detection of a submarine. What is that like? What does that mean in terms of how should I approach it? Where is it relative to my ship, relative to the convoy? Like, is it a threat there? Mm-hmm. Is there another contact that's a bigger threat? As you start getting closer in, like, you don't just, it's not like you can just go directly over the top of the sub and drop your depth charges. Like, you're going to miss every time if you do that. It is a challenging game too. I think it speaks to a lot of the math and the challenges behind anti-submarine warfare in World War II, you know, in kind of in a similar vein, although not really the same as something like Silent Hunter does.
Yeah, like you said, it is difficult. They did add quite a few assists. They added a career mode. It's admittedly, the career mode's rough around the edges. A lot of the cutscenes, like, they use AI text generated stuff, so that kind of takes me out of it. But the core gameplay, I love. So that it's probably not going to be everybody's number one, but I'm just happy to see something like this released. So
Tom Hanks Simulator.
pretty much, yep.
Yeah, Wolf, watching your current series, I think I was surprised at the stuff that they have added with the career campaign and then some of the features in that campaign. I guess I've only was used to watching you play the little demo, which was just the short missions, but I guess it's nice to see it is coming along nicely.
Yeah, the missions are persistent now, so you lose ships as this convoy goes along, and those ships stay lost until you reach your destination or whatever. A lot of people were wishing that there was like more of a dynamic campaign like Silent Hunter, where you would just sit on your destroyer and watch the time go by, but I don't think people realize how boring that would be. This puts you in the engagements. You hop in whenever you get a contact, and you just have the actual traveling in your head. Like, you just imagine it instead of just sitting and looking at a map on a projected route that you didn't even make yourself.
That would be an interesting game design experiment, because I think you're right. And I think the reason it works for Silent Hunter and it doesn't for Destroyer, or I don't think it would for Destroyer, is because Silent Hunter, you're the attacker. You are the one on the...
Mm-hmm.
You're driving all the initiative, right? Like, so what you do, where you decide to kind of sit out and hopefully interdict a convoy, like, that's all your decision. You're also the hunted too. So, like, there's all these things outside the convoy that are coming for you, that are trying to find you and trying to stop you. Whereas, like, as a destroyer,
You're defensive. You're shepherd.
yeah, you're following a scripted path.
Yeah.
And if you run into something along that path, then something will happen. And if you don't, then nothing will happen. And you can't deviate from that path. And there's nothing else out there really coming for you. They're coming for the other ships and the convoy, and they might try to attack you. But it's kind of like building a game where you're driving over a speed bump as the action, as opposed to like Silent Hunter's, like, you're building the road.
Yeah, exactly. Completely agreed. And I mean, it could work if it was like a hunter-killer simulator where you control like a hunter-killer group, which would be cool, but that's not what the game is. So I think how they did it is fine. It works. I'm okay with it. I'm glad the developers like didn't bite off more than it can chew. Like, it's refreshing to see a game with limited scope release and them do pretty much what they said they were going to, and not promising the moon.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
That's that. It could be polished up, of course. If they want some voice acting, I'll do it. But because some of the AI text-to-speech stuff, some of it's really good today, and then some of it's so-so. So, yep, that's it. That's my number one. THG. Let's keep this thing a-moving.
Tortuga already got my number one, so...
Oh, it was the Great War?
I can add one, and I won't talk too much about this.
No, that's all right. We can move on. That's fine.
Grand Tactician. Whiskey and Lemons. Play it.
Oh boy, really?
Yeah.
Was that your number one?
I mean, no, my number one was the Great War, but it wasn't on this list, and it's because it's a DLC. But
I heard that DLC was kind of rough.
Everything with Grand Tactician, when it has come out, has been rough, and then they have polished it to get better over time. I think it is really fun to play as an individual within the Civil War rather than as the Supreme Commander and be like, hey, you only command a regiment, you only command a brigade. I love the role-playing elements that they build into it, of like, it's about you progressing your career, not you being Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant at the same time and controlling everything. It's definitely worth checking out.
No, I love that. I love that aspect of it as well. Just commanding a single guy. I mean, that's kind of why I like the IL-2 career as opposed to, like, you know, you have Falcon where you control the whole battle, but I like just being my dude.
Exactly. That's the same reason I love playing Call of Duty. I'm just one guy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's why I play Fortnite.
Good point. Oh boy. Finishes number one. He leaked it early.
Number one game of the year, Fortnite.
What about you, Finnish? What is your number one?
My number one game of the year will be a shock to at least one person, and it's going to be Gates of Hell Ostfront.
Let's go!
Even after Wolf said he's forced me to play it, I have ranked it as my top game of 2023. Starting with the positives, I think the game had a ton of cool units. It's got a ton of, he's got the Finns, so, gotta give it bonus points for that.
This guy doesn't even like playing as the Finns, though, so...
Yeah, they got a bunch of crap, to be honest, and they just get this secondhand... They have to go to, the secondhand store, good... What is it, the good... Walgreens? What's the secondhand store
Goodwill?
called? Goodwill, yeah. Goodwill.
The German Goodwill.
The German Goodwill. And captured Soviet crap, but anyway...
Is this some Stockholm Syndrome stuff going on here? He's just forced you to play it so much, you're just this is a good game.
I think so.
I really like the dynamic campaign a lot more than the scripted campaigns, the scripted missions. The scripted missions have been very frustrating, I will admit that. Maybe because I'm just bad at the game. But the dynamic campaign is fun, because you have the chance to attack and then defend, and I like kind of that back and forth. I like having more options to defend compared to the scripted campaign missions. There's a whole lot of attacking in those, so I like defending.
Well, admittedly, I do want to mention we are playing as the Americans in the scripted campaign, so it makes sense there would be a whole lot of attacking.
Yeah.
I mean, as we push through Europe, I do think maybe the German campaign will be more defensive, although I do think it does Watch on the Rhine stuff, so I don't know. We'll see whenever we hop into it.
Two other positives I like for this game was the first person mode really adds a different element to kind of your RTS that I don't think we see anywhere else. So I enjoy driving around in a tank or taking command of a single guy and shooting. And lastly, I do like the damage model for the units and stuff. I think when you play against the AI, infantry, they're a little bit too beefy. They'll take too many rounds compared to your guys, and it's probably just due to a difficulty scaling thing. But I do like the damage model for tanks. I think that it's pretty realistic. And thinking to games like Steel Division of kind of realism with tank vehicle damage. Overall, yeah, I think it's a pretty solid game. I like it. One of the things I would like more, which is... I guess a quality of life improvement from Steel Division, was kind of that line of sight tool. I would love to be able to see what units can see on the map. Where can my guys see? Where can the enemy units see? Where's the cover? You have so much control over the camera angles and stuff that you can kind of get down and see where the hills and stuff are. But I'd love to just zoom out and just see kind of the line of sight tool that Steel Division has. So I can see where the hills are and where the hedgerows are and stuff like that. So the game, I think, really needs that, but otherwise, just minor improvements here and there. Pretty solid game. That's my number one.
By the way, Reddit says Germany doesn't really have an equivalent of Goodwill. They have a few organized flea markets, I guess is what they're saying, and a few thrift shops, but sounds like they export a lot of their secondhand stuff to other countries, which I guess maybe Finland.
We're talking Germany 1943, They were just handing all their Romanians and Hungarian allies trash weapons and then cry about it whenever the Russians come blitzing across. It's your... Yeah, maybe you should have given them some better weapons, big guy.
Maybe they shouldn't have joined the Nazis.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, that's... Yeah, can't really...
Finish getting all political in here.
On my shelf, on my bookshelf, I have a Finnish World War II helmet, but it's German made, so it's...
Cut that!
All right, Tortuga, you're up. You just changed your list mid-podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wanted to... just at the last minute, I decided I really wanted to honor my new favorite publisher, Hooded Horse. So I decided to put Against the Storm #1. They also released Xenonauts 2, which I didn't play, but I think it's in decent shape. But anyway, I've been really enjoying all the titles that Hooded Horse has released lately. Against the Storm is it's actually a colony builder type thing. It's a little bit reminiscent of the old Impression games like Caesar 3 and Pharaoh and all that. Yeah, you have to build up, your city in the right way, but it's very roguelike. So it's hard to explain the mechanics, Finnish. I don't know, you've watched a couple streams of it, if you can even jump in and help, because I don't know how to describe it well, but it's basically a colony builder where you expand your city and get resources, and you're on a timer. There's something called like the Queen's Impatience or something like that, and it just slowly ticks up, and if it gets to maximum, you lose. There's ways to bring it down, and then you're just completing objectives on each little map, which build up her, her favor or whatever it is, and if you get her favor to max, you win the mission. But it's a lot of fun. I don't know if it's a lot of fun to watch, but it's very addictive. The first time I played it, I typically go to bed around 11:30 or midnight, and I need to get up at like 5:30 or 6. I played until like 1:30 in the morning, so it has that kind of thing going for it.
I think it just as a viewer of this game, I think it's got an interesting strategy element of when you can expand and where you can expand, and like when you have to expand, then you have to fight that boss, I guess, to get in certain areas of the map, right, to get better resources or whatever. I think there's definitely like a little strategy element to that colonization and expansion that I think is intriguing. And then also, I say I guess you have different species in your colony, right? So they offer different kind of bonuses or different kind of, skills. Or
different kind of food that you're supposed to supply for them. And the roguelike nature of the game is really cool from the perspective that, like, I prefer to do the farming thing to get wheat and to make biscuits or whatever, which the beavers like. There's beavers, humans, harpies, it's kind of a random collection of, and like, what is it, crocodiles? Dinosaurs?
Lizards or something, and then you get your plain old humans.
It's an inspired choice, I would say, artistically, or like the feel of the game is very different than anything I've seen before. It's not like your typical fantasy setting where you got like orcs and elves or something like that, but it has that kind of fantasy feel to it. But yeah, they have the different creatures provide different bonuses, also demand different foods. So if you're on a map where you just don't get any wheat, then you have to figure out a new way to provide for all the different people what your food source is going to be, which just forces you, like in a lot of games, you figure out the best strategy and then you just keep doing it map after map. But the way the resources are very randomized, you end up frequently with maps which will force you to play a strategy you wouldn't have played otherwise. And that ends up being fun too, because the game's done well. So I would say this is an easy recommend for people who enjoy that kind of Banished or Caesar 3 type games. Good stuff. Well, I think we should go for our honorable mentions now. If anybody has any that they want to kind of list off. One of mine, we'll just go back in the circle. We'll stick with you, Wolf. You want to just mention any other titles that you were thinking about putting on the list, but they didn't quite make it?
No, I mean, the only other games I'm excited about is Postscriptum being revived. That's an honorable mention. I love that game as a first-person shooter, and it's kind of making a comeback it's been rebranded. It was purchased by their publisher. So it's now called Squad 44. Anyway, it's by far my favorite first-person shooter, and I'm happy to see that back. And I've talked about this other game quite a bit, but Warhammer 40,000 Darktide has been my just chill, relaxing game. Just go in and kill stuff. It's like, you played Vermintide, I believe, Tortuga. So, it's that, but 40K. They've done quite a bit. They've added skill trees and stuff to kind of flesh out the experience, so...
Just for people who aren't familiar with that game, it's this like 4-person co-op.
I don't know, just hack and slash.
Yeah.
Horde fighting. Yeah. Yeah, and you're fighting in the 40K universe, which I like already a lot. I am kind of a 40K nerd, so... For me, it's reminiscent of, which is a very old title at this point, Left 4 Dead. Yeah, very similar to that. That's where a lot of the Tide games get their inspiration from, so... And going on to THG.
I'd say Grand Tactician would have been the one that stood out. We kind of already talked about that. I think the Unity of Command DLCs that have been coming out have also... Unity of Command 2 DLCs that have been coming out have been continue to be very, very good and worth taking a look at. And maybe other games that maybe they're on a future list, but I haven't had a chance to play them yet. But I know they're games of note. Terra Invicta, definitely. And I'm excited to see what's going on with Gunner Heat PC. Like,
Oh yeah, jeez.
I played that a lot when it first entered early access. It seems like they're making some good progress.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe this is more for like 2024, but like I'm excited to see where it goes in 2024.
Yeah, I mean they've added, they've kind of teased the T64. It's an AI asset, and they've added like smoke launchers and all sorts of stuff. Air support's getting fleshed out.
You know, it's not like a super high fidelity sim where it gets like, correct me if you think I'm wrong, Wolf, but I don't think it rises to like DCS level when it comes to like simming.
No, it's not like Steel Beast, I guess would be. Yeah, it's approachable. It's sim light. You hop in, they model all the optics appropriately, but you're not in there flipping switches and crap.
But that being said, the smoke is the example. Different countries used smoke differently, and they do model, I believe they model that based on what I saw in the patch notes, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
the way that the Russians deploy their, or the Eastern Bloc deploy their smoke is different than the way that the Abrams or the Americans will deploy their smoke. So like there's a level of authenticity despite it not being, you can flip every switch in the tank.
it zooms out a little bit from that sort of fidelity. It's detailed in a different way, and in my opinion, a way that makes the world feel much more alive.
Yeah, that's all I got.
I guess I don't know if I have an honorable mention. A game that I guess I like a lot, but I didn't, I guess, play a whole lot in 2023 was probably IL-2 Tank Crew. I love playing that game. I mean, the multiplayer is just so much fun. You know, the tanks are so much fun. The damage model is so much fun. It's all realistic. Just love the realism. It's just a shame that multiplayer scene is, almost non-existent. If we have any sort of, because we're talking about Gunner Heat PC, and that's definitely like a Cold War. If someone else wants to make a IL-2 Tank Crew kind of standalone deal that's realistic like that, I will play it.
Well, there is a game literally called like Tank Squad, and they had a demo, and it was questionable.
Yeah, I think you sent this to me. Yeah,
but the vision's there. Like I can see it kind of being fleshed out and being better eventually. It says planned release date is Q1 2024. I don't know. Based on what I played in the demo, I don't know how realistic that launch date is.
Yep, that's my only honorable mention. Tortuga, you're up. You had a list, multiple things.
I mean, I wrote down a lot of different games, but I'll just honorably mention a few of them. One that probably really wanted to squeeze in my top 3 was Dune Spice Wars. It's the Dune version, the sci-fi universe of Dune. Version of, what was the previously, Northland, or there was, I forget what the predecessor was for this. It's the same people who did
was it Northgard?
Northgard, yes, thank you. Yeah, so it's the next game after Northgard. It's very similar in play style, but it's in the Dune universe. I thought it was done very well. I really enjoy it. For people who enjoy, I don't know, Northgard type things or are interested in the Dune universe, it's nice to see a return for a game to the Dune universe. That was...
Wow, Northgard has 44,000 reviews.
Oh, wow. I wonder how many Dune Spice Wars has, because I think it was still...
8,000.
I'm glad, because I know that they were kind of bummed out. They were trying to time their release for the second Dune movie, and then the Dune movie got delayed.
I remember playing Dune Spice Wars a bit, and I thought it was like, I'm not like huge into the Dune universe, but I remember playing and I was like, hey, this is pretty good. It's like, this seems like an interesting and enjoyable game.
I think that's that's well put. It's a great way of describing it. It's just a fun game, and especially if you are interested in the Dune universe, it's will be even more appealing. Let me also mention that Age of Wonders 4 came out. I did not play this one. I think it's so anybody who's familiar with the Age of Wonders series, God, what's the how do you even describe this? It's a fantasy 4X type game, but it has the tactical combat. How to describe it? It's like a Civ type game, but it has tactical combat where you cast spells and such and actually have to move around. So that's another honorable mention. And last, sorry, but let me sneak in also Shadow Empires Oceania DLC released. I just think Shadow Empire is such a good game that it deserves to be mentioned that was released. Although, kind of had mixed reviews. People had different thoughts about how the naval force stuff was done. Since it was abstracted, you weren't actually controlling fleets. It turns out, I mean, at least somebody has mentioned that this was actually because I had a conversation. I think it was you as well, Matt, that we had a conversation with Vic about naval combat and how turn-based naval combat is always done so poorly, which I still agree with. So he took that, and it was the inspiration for him not to have fleet control in Shadow Empire. So he abstracted it.
Wait, we influenced him?
I don't know. I mean, if you believe the rumors, yes.
We've made it.
We have done, and everyone hated that, of course, so we're the...
No.
Oh, it's our head on the chopping block.
So are you sure that's not just, their company was like, well, we just listened to the podcast and they said that this was what we should do. So it's not our fault.
I mean, Vic was on, actually. We talked with him directly. And
that's true.
At least I've mentioned this to him before. But no, I think that people are coming around to actually the way he did it. So it wasn't a huge success on release, but I think people are now seeing the merits of it. Honorable mention Shadow Empire as well, with their DLC release, just because that's such a great game, it deserves many mentions. On Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts was on my potential list because I also saw that it was released. It's not a bad game, but
he's coming around. Give it 2 years and this is gonna be the core to your channel.
2 years.
When's the last time you played it?
It's a long, long time. I was so soured on the development.
This is probably a topic for another day, but I do feel like it's interesting how your initial experience of the game, and this is such a problem with early access, can completely corrupt your ability to enjoy a game later on and prevent you from ever really wanting to go back to a game. And a lot of times games change a lot in early access, but that initial experience you have is so powerful, or those initial disappointed expectations are so powerful, that I think a lot of games fail because maybe they come out too early, even in early access.
Well, this is a tangent, again, we'll add that to the upcoming episode about this, but even Star Citizen, I feel, is like this. Like, it's probably an okay game at this point, that if, like, today suddenly they just released a new game that nobody had ever heard of called Star Citizen in its current state, people would be like, oh yeah, this is good. But the development has so soured people to that game that, nobody even wants to.
But yeah, I mean, you could never escape the baggage that comes with what Star Citizen, the name, means. Anyway.
All right, gamers.
I guess that'll wrap up episode 82 and our look at 2023. We'll have to come back for episode 83, looking at 2024 and what we're all excited about this year. But I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. Thanks again for tuning in to the Single Malt Strategy podcast once again. Feel free, if you do enjoy these, to leave reviews on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.
Smash that like button, baby. Yeah.
Smash it. or give us 5 stars, because I don't think Apple has a like button. I think you give like a star rating, right? So don't do 1 star. Remember, more stars is good. And if you want to rant at us in our comments on YouTube, you can do that too. But thanks everybody to my trusty co-hosts for coming on yet another episode of the Single Malt Strategy. And as always, until next time, we're out.